10 mixing myths that are bullshit in the audio industry. That's what we're going to be discussing today on the Working Audio Tools podcast with myself, Ed Thorne, and fellow YouTuber Paul Third. Paul, let's dive straight in because this is an interesting topic. Lots to debate. No doubt there'll be some comments on this video. I'll let you take away with your first one.
Number one, which won't surprise anybody because we actually talked about it in last week's episode with Anthony. You should not mix into a limiter or, print with your limiter on. That was something that I was told so much over the past 15 years. When I was at Audio University and stuff, it was all yeah, leave that for the mastering engineer. Never, ever, ever mix your limiter on. Actually, you shouldn't really mix into a limiter, because if you mix into a limiter, then again, you're not a mastering engineer. Basically, what they were kind of making out was that a mixing engineer who has to do everything in the mix, really, right? That's your job. So you've got to do all the compression, get everything balanced, do all everything in a mix. But amazingly, a mixer can't use a fucking limiter. We don't know how to use a limiter. It's mental. So that was something that I never used to do. And then it was my mentor, Emre Çelik. He taught me, I was basically sat down, he sat down online with me virtually, and he just said to me, Paul, this is what you should be doing. You should be mixing into a limiter, because if you mix into a limiter, then you can hear the effects of the limiting, and you can basically master your track before it's even done. So you always should have a reference of, how your kick processing, your dynamic processing, your snare, your bass, your low end, how everything is impacting that limiter. Because at the end of the day, if you're mixing into a limiter, then you can control everything on the way going in. So you know how everything is going to impact. And at the end of the day, if you can get -9, -8, and the client accepts it, then you've done your job. Print it, that's what the client has accepted. And as Anthony, had said last week, a big part of, mixing for clients is that you've always got to be louder than the rough. That's an industry must do. So you've got to be louder than the rough. So if they come in at -6, you've got to come in at -5.5. You know what I mean? It is the way it is.
That's definitely a quote for our potential book.
Yeah, totally.
I totally agree with that. Well, with your sentiment that you should mix into a limiter. I learned the hard way with with one of my own tracks, because I was led to believe, like many people, that you need to leave 6 dB worth of headroom on your master bus for your mixing engineer, which is utterly stupid because the mastering engineer can just turn the gain down. It was also suggested not to use a limiter for this reason. However, when this track, who was mastered by a well-known YouTube mastering engineer, came back, the dynamics of one of the sections had all gone awry and the vocals popped out way more than they should have done versus the piano, and I had to send him a couple of revisions thinking that the mix was the problem. Actually, it wasn't. The mix was right, but I had to change it in reference to how much he was going to limit it. But this was many years ago, way before I was mastering, and I didn't quite understand that it was the limiting that was causing this fluctuation in the vocals, or movement in the vocals away from my mixing intention. Now, then the question is, has he done a good job mastering it? I did, from then on, start thinking, hang on, if this is the effect of limiting, I need to at least try it on my mix bus before I send it out. But I was still in the idea of, no, you can't send a mix out with a limiter on, because you need to give your mastering engineer something to do, and they need to do the limiting. But actually, what has changed over the years, as mixers have needed to be louder, we've needed to shave off those peaks with clipping and limiting to enable the tracks to be louder and louder. And it wouldn't surprise me really if at some point the standard mix delivery is -8 for the mastering to then get down to -4. I mean,
I know, it's crazy.
Or even into positive numbers. Anyway, I agree with you, Paul. Shall I take over with my first one?
Yes, please do. Please do.
Okay, this was kind of a live sound thing for me, I think, but I applied it to the studio stuff and it just doesn't work, and I'm sure other people have been told this, and that is, don't high pass the bass. And many bass players will tell you that, don't high pass the bass, but what they are not aware of, as we are now very aware, is the amount of information in the low end, and actually a lot of it is just woof and noise. It's not adding anything harmonically to the track at that point. or in terms of energy. It's just adding. It can add weight. It can be essential in certain genres. Don't get me wrong, going down to 20 hertz. But your comment a few episodes ago about, I was high passing the bass to 70. I was like, this guy's mental. What's he on about? And then I did it on a couple of mixes, and I was like, right. When there's a time and a space for it, it's actually quite a good practice to high pass the bass that far. Again, always do it to taste, but just to say, don't high pass the bass doesn't make sense. Even live, it doesn't make sense. You've got all that noise rumbling in rooms. It's a soggy mess of low end.
Yep. And I think what's important to remember for everybody is that, in regards to, again, mixing into your limiter, what triggers limiting the most is your low end, right?
Yep.
So if you've got excessive low end energy in there, then you're just giving yourself a harder time in the limiting side when you have to get that loud, because what's happening is your low end is fighting against your limiter. So, when I speak to lots of mixers and, we've done lots of interviews, one of the most consistent things that you'll always hear is something's got to win. Like, both cannot win. It's either the kick or it's either the bass. So on that last mix that we did, the Robert Tilgman, was that his name? I can't remember. The
I've
Illusion
erased
mix,
that hideous experience from my memory.
So I finished it all, and I ended up having quite a decent mix, and my mastering engineer finished it off. And one thing that I found with that mix was to get the low end, because the kick was the thing for me that was kind of taking the priority, because it was a dance song. I think the kick was really important, was that I had to give that sub that many bass players would think would go to the bass to the kick. So you had to give all that kind of low kind of sub, low lows, as Warren Hewitt always calls it. I had to give those low lows to the kick and let that win, and then I kind of, high pass the bass further up. And then when you kind of remember that everything is in octaves, you remember that, just because you're taking out the subs of a bass doesn't mean that it's not impactful and you're doing something horribly harmonically. Because at the end of the day, if the fundamentals of the bass is at 40, then, again, you could sit there and say the next octave is going to be 80. Even you think about Spike Stent when he was in a lecture. I've made notes from that because I've watched it 3 times. And he was talking about, a lot of times he likes to boost around 200, which would, a lot of times maybe be like your third octave. Second octave, I should say. So say if it was 40, 80, 160. He normally boosts around there. So in a lot of mixes, he might say the kicks, maybe say the fundamentals at 50, again, your octave of that would be 100. So again, you'd boost 100, maybe boost, say, 160 on the bass. And then from there, if he was going to add low end to the track, he'd add a bit of 50 to the kick. And you can give that kind of subs. But again, if the bass is the thing that's got to win, then you'd thin out your kick and you'd give all that sub to the low end. And it's how you manage that. That's why Jason Joshua always does the side chain trick, where the kick always side chains the bass, and the bass will duck every time the kick hits, because you cannot have those two meeting at the same time. If it's equal energy at the same time, limiter goes bop.
Yeah. So expanding on that, what I was taught initially was if your fundamental on the kick is 80 and the bass is let's say 60 on the kick, 80 on the bass, you dip out 60 on the bass.
Mm-hmm.
And boost 60 on the kick, and then dip out 80 on the kick and boost 80 on the bass, which is a very basic, not necessarily suggested way of doing it. It's one way of doing it, but it's not necessarily suggested way. Definitely sidechain compression is, if they have to clash, if they are a clash, you will get a recording at some point where the fundamental is the same. You then really have to completely duck that bass out for the kick transient to come through using sidechain compression, time it is. And there's a very good reference that Spike Stent does on a Dua Lipa track where the kick and the bass are the same frequency, and somehow he just gets this incredible separation for a brief second. It's almost as if the bass transient starts before the kick drum, which comes in, dips the bass so it can be heard, and then the bass transient carries on going. Very intelligent, remarkable mixing. What's your point number 3, Paul?
My number 2 is, no surprise, many people in my lifetime have told me, Paul, sorry to say it, son, but you just can't mix on headphones professionally, son. If you're going to mix professionally, son, you got to mix on speakers. Nobody in this planet, can mix on headphones. It cannot be done. That's the way it's always been done, and that's the way it will be done. go back in your bedroom, little boy, and I will go back to my 80 grand speakers.
I feel like you've morphed from Donald Trump to Barry Johns there in one
I know, I
sentence.
just kind of felt like kind of just wavering there. I know what's funny, see with those guys, is it see anytime I went, go and show us your mixes.
Yes, you
So
said
and
that
so has
last week.
left the building. It's like, all right, okay, bye-bye then. Shitbug. But yes, that's my number 2. But it's a complete and utter bullshit myth that you cannot mix professional on headphones. It's been done. Emmerich proved it. Our good friend MSN, he's done loads of mixes on headphones. Yeah, a lot of these guys are still hybrid. They've still got really good speaker setups. But, push comes to shove. If they need to do a mix on headphones, they could do it and wouldn't have any issues in doing it. So it's bullshit.
Again, it's knowing you're monitoring. Now, I understand that some people lean one way or the other. I initially led towards speakers. I did one mix that I put out that I did purely on headphones. It's not my best mix. I didn't really like it. But I am definitely seeing the value of both. And I'm getting more confident that I could sit on a beach in Costa Rica next week and mix a track on headphones and it would still be pretty good. I just need to work out a little bit more regarding crossfeed. And that's one of my dominoes this year. Right, my number 2, the podcast number 4. You can't mix accurately without room correction. Now, as someone who has obsessed and rabbit-holed room correction and has tried 4 of the 5 major room correction tools, not Dirac being the one I haven't used, not including Ruse because that's not doing the correction for you like the other 5 systems, which are obviously Sound ID, Arc, MA1 from Neumann, and Trinov. I think it's pretty necessary, but there are people who mix without it. And Anthony last week, he said he didn't have any correction, didn't he?
Yep.
And there are numerous studios, some of the big studios, I mean, they've had rooms tuned, professionally treated. So I feel like this is one where you could very easily be on the fence, and as you can probably tell, I'm not even sure I've made my own mind up about this. Again, there'll be people screaming, just learn your monitors, innit? Learn your room, learn the sound.
Learn and mix.
That is one way of doing it, but what I would say is room correction make things a fuckload easier.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, at the end of the day, look, Lord and Saviour, Spike Stent, doesn't use room correction. That was a surprising thing when I heard that. And even my good friend, Emmerich does not use room correction.
But he's all over EQ curves and...
I know, totally. It's so funny. You'd think he would be like OTT with the speakers, but, the way that he works is very good. The way that Yesko works a lot. If you speak to Yesko, he'll always say, which is interesting because Nick from Panorama Mastering did a video talking about, trying to think about how he's going to position his room and all the acoustic treatment and stuff. And all he spent like 10 minutes doing was just finding the right listening position in the room. I remember when I got the studio, Emra said, and I remember I didn't really listen to him because my wife was like, no, that's not going there. Well, but it has to go there acoustically. Emra said it does. No, because it looks shit. So you're going to put everything where it looks good and I'm going to feng shui things. I'm like, okay, honey, whatever.
Speaking of Paul's wife, has anybody noticed how clean the background is in Paul's video this week?
I know. She was pure raging.
I got a message on Instagram
she was raging,
saying,
man.
Did he really let that stay in the background?
By the way, my wife sounds fucking nothing like that.
It was also
she's
text,
like very
I can't remember what she sounds like.
So
moving swiftly on. What did you do? Did you find the best listening position eventually?
Yeah, so I tried Laura's method, like where it was going to go. And it was funny because everybody said to me that, and I did a chat GPT and I got in touch with a few like people that knows acoustics and stuff. And they said, because of the way my room layout was, you should use the long wall. And I was like, what the fuck am I going to use the long wall? And they're like, yeah, but it makes more sense to use the long wall for where your speakers are going to be. But I'm like, but that would mean my first reflection point would have a window on my first reflection point. That's not very good. So I set it up, my speakers sit on the short wall, so the speakers are behind the window, so it's less of an issue. And then I treated everything else. And then...
hang on. Behind the window, but on one side you've got a wall and on the other side you've got glass paneling, glass doors.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. So, but here's in my head, right? It's a lesser two evils, right? So, if I would have put my listening position in the desk on that long wall there, right? when what the speakers are facing into would have been that entire wall of glass, which I've got a curtain on. So you think about the curtain's not going to do that great a job. So I'm going to be reflection city for anything coming off of that. And then on my left hand side, my first reflection point was going to be the window. Where for here, the speakers face this back wall. So I've got a GIK bass traps like on that side, and then I've got a bit of acoustic paneling in there. And then the good thing is that the corner of that isn't like a straight corner. It's like that, which is better acoustically because it's not really causing that much. It's still an issue, but it's not as bad as it could be. And so then I found the right position, put it in the middle of the desk, and then I played about for what felt like weeks, inches,
I
moving
remember
the
it was
desk.
weeks, yeah.
And it was like moving the right distance so I can get the least amount of low-mid interference, which I've still got in this room because of this fucking desk. And finding, the right kind of distance from the wall so I had enough boundary interference to be able to kind of manage the null that's in this room. It was a bit of a bollock. But this week, actually, Wednesday, I managed to get 2 freestanding gobos from GIK for 220 quid. Pretty damn good. 600 by 1500. I got 2 of them. So I'm going to put them on this side here, which is like the wall of glass thing. It's got, so that way my first reflection point is going to be completely like perfectly treated. Then behind that, I've got another piece of treatment. And again, with the height being like 1500, it's enough for me in my listening position, which is about 1.2. It's not ideal, but as we can just say there, if you think about all the work I've had to put in, when realistically, like somebody, an acoustic designer could have just came into me and said from the beginning, right, don't treat that, put that in, put that specific piece of panel in there, put that piece of panel in there, get your desk here, actually scrap that desk. And many people will just say, just do it right to begin with and just manage it. And then from there, once you've got all the stuff and you've got all the limitations that you've got, you can either correct it or you can learn it. And that's what, many people have chosen to do.
But the ultimate point being you've got to deal with whatever room acoustics and materials on all sides you've got. Find the lesser of all the evils, of which there are many. Do the best you can, and then room correction is basically the sticking plaster for the last few decibels of crap.
Yeah. But to be honest, as we said, you've got Emre Celik, fucking billions of streams for his mixes and masters. Spike Stent, arguably one of the best mixers of all time, still to this day, the singles mixer, doesn't use room correction. So yeah, it's bullshit. It does help, and me and Ed both use it. However, you can't say that it's needed because other people have done it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine Spike's exactly mixing in a garage studio, though.
No, exactly.
But there is a famous story of him working in, was it church studios, and bringing in mattresses to line the walls. That was his room correction. Insane. All right, what's your number 3?
So my number 3, actually we've already kind of talked about it already, but is that clippers are bad and you shouldn't use clippers, especially hard clipping. I'll say this rule. Okay, what I'll say is that hard clipping, you shouldn't use hard clipping, because we all know now that your clipping has been really effective to get loudness. But many people have got this thing where you shouldn't use hard clipping, where Emre taught me to use hard clipping, because what the distortion that everybody's trying to avoid does is gives you perceived loudness. It's like this extra form of loudness. And again, I remember I taught you this, I think it was like 6 months ago, me and you were talking about it, and you were like, why would you do hard clipping? And I was talking to you about, if you think about the transfer curve, if you think about the way that the soft clipping algorithms work, is that essentially what you're doing is, due to the knee, you're kind of compressing before you get to the ceiling, where it then fucking clips. Where if you hard clip, what it's doing is you're not softening your transients before that. So what you're doing is you're genuinely just getting that hard clipping, and your transients, you're maintaining your transients, and you're adding that extra bit of distortion. So it's kind of, the both of them work really well. And I think for kick, snare, drums, and stuff like that, hard clipping is really beneficial. Would you want to do it on your mix bus? Probably not. I'd probably say that soft clipping probably works a lot better for mix bus, which is why you'll see many people using gold clip and stuff like that. But you can't use hard clipping, and again, distortion isn't always the worst thing. You could use distortion to your advantage, and many people like Emre have used it to their advantage. And yeah, if it works, it works. But yeah, like, clipping isn't bad. If you watch AP Mastering's video on it, please, like anything, if you abuse something and you fucking smash something with 4 to 5 dB of clipping, then yeah, sometimes it can sound horrible. But sometimes on a snare, there's an interesting thing. Somebody, I think, commented or messaged me about the last mix, and I was like, for whatever reason, like 4 to 5 dB of clipping on that specific snare just sounded really good. It was like bap, 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 and controlled it. And then somebody commented to say that in metal, heavy clipping, hard clipping the snares, actually, I think they do a lot in metal mixing because it just works. And again, it makes sense. It's a sound, but if you imagine something like a metal mix, you've got all those distorted guitars and you've got all that energy that's in the guitars. You do need to get your snare to cut through like a knife. So yeah, maybe getting that snare really level and pop, 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 and then adding that like extra bit of distortion that you're getting from the hard clipping, it could be, be beneficial. So yeah, nothing wrong with clipping. Anybody tells you don't clip, don't use hard clipping in your mix, fucking hell, what a lot of bullshit. Use what works. Many professionals do it, and yep.
As with everything, use to taste.
Correct. Thank you very much. That is the best point. Yep.
The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. Don't forget, you can't just upload your songs to Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, or Tidal. You have to go through a music distribution service. There are many out there, but DistroKid is the one that Paul and myself use. They don't take any of your royalties. You keep 100% of the streaming revenue that you earn. For just $1.92 a month or $22.99 a year, you can upload unlimited songs. Your lyrics can be found in Google and other places. You get the blue Spotify verified checkmark, and you can create royalty splits between yourselves and fellow contributors. You also get access to the new DistroKid iPhone app for editing and uploading songs and accessing your statistics on the move. There are plenty of other tools available on DistroKid. We'll go through those in another section. My third one, the sixth one of the episode, is you don't need to learn Pro Tools. Now, you don't need to learn Pro Tools. This is true. Recording engineers don't need to learn Pro Tools. Producers don't need to learn Pro Tools. Mix engineers don't need to learn Pro Tools. Mastering engineers don't need to use Pro Tools. However, if you want to go to the top of the industry, everyone uses Pro Tools. Yes, there are people producing in different DAWs, but ultimately, all the top guys, all the top studios are mixing in Pro Tools. Every top guy that I can think of that we've had on the episode, unless you can think of others, Paul, your tism brain's better at remembering these things than mine, they're all getting sessions delivered in Pro Tools. I guess maybe a few people are getting sessions delivered in Logic.
Ableton as well, if you're in those kind of genres.
Ableton as well, but most of the high-end mixing engineers, like the guys we're aspiring to be, are mixing in Pro Tools, and you have to know your way around it. If you go to one of the major studios anywhere, they're working in Pro Tools. So if you are engineering, you do need to know Pro Tools if you want to be at that end of the industry. If you're mixing and mastering, you do need to be in Pro Tools if you want to be at that end of the industry. I used to hate Pro Tools when I started. It's a very different experience to Logic, but actually now I've just taken a set of stems from a recording session in Logic, whereas normally I would save a session, do the editing, save another session, and then do the mix. In Logic, I've exported them all to Pro Tools, and I've got a really good template now in Pro Tools, and I love it.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I think there's a realism involved that as much as I don't want to use Pro Tools, it's because I know I'm not going to get into the industry. The chances of me getting in the industry are like 0.1%. If you think about what Anthony was speaking about last week, again, if you want to be in the industry, you need to move to where the industry is. And, if you're in the UK, the UK is a little bit different. You can get away with certain things, but, London is basically the LA, of the UK scene. And if you're in, you want to be in that kind of scene, then, London's where a lot of the artists live. And what's very important to understand is it's where the artists are. So if you're in America, if you're in country, Nashville's kind of going to be your hotspot. There are a lot of artists that are in New York. So again, a lot of the New York mixers will work in the New York scene. But in LA, the pop industry is essentially in LA. Like when we stayed with Warren in Laurel Canyon, Like, it was crazy when you were thinking about the people that lived just in the vicinity where Warren was. All the mixers, and then again, sadly, unfortunately, a lot of these mixers recently lost their houses and due to the fires. And again, I was reminded just how many mixers lived, in that area. Spike Stent lost his house. Greg Wells lost his house. I think it was Howie Weinberg. I think that he lost his house. There's quite a few other. Bob Clearmountain lost his house as well. And what it shows you is that if you want to make it in the industry, then you have to meet the standards of the industry. Is Pro Tools the industry standard? Yes. Not quality-wise, because I fucking hate it and I chose not to work in it. I was on it for 10 years and went away from it. But I don't have that expectation of the industry. I'm in a fortunate place where, I'm not pushing the industry. So I'm just like, right, hopefully I record it and I mix it. And at the end of the day, if it's, a client and they come in and they're like, yeah, I want you to mix this, Paul. Right. Okay, just stem it and send us the stems, or again, just send us all the tracks, and it could work. Emre Celik, for example, he's Studio One. Luca Pretolesi, he's Studio One. And there's a lot of big Studio One users. Again, there'll be Reaper users as well. But in regards to industry top level, I would have to agree with Ed that if you want to be in that level, you want to be, in the labels' pockets. You want to be, the Meghan Trainors and the Katy Perrys and, the Sabrina Carpenters and The Weeknd and blah, 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 de blah, de blah, all these big shot names. You've got to be working in the industry. The producers are on Pro Tools. Normally the mix engineers are on Pro Tools. And if you look at mix with the masters, you struggle, because I've got it now, but you struggle to see any mixer that's not on Pro Tools. Like, it's just very hard. And if you want to get work in this industry, then you need to realise that loads of people are on Pro Tools. As much as I don't think, and I know for me personally, it's like an archaic DAW, and like things like Studio One and Reaper and blah, 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 they just fucking mince it. Ed's completely right that it is an industry standard. It depends on what you class as industry. If you class as industry as the music industry, then yeah, it's industry standard. So yeah, Ed, as much as I hate to say it, you are right there. I have to agree with you there.
You made an interesting point there, which is if you want to be at that level of the industry, you have to move to the industry. It's all very well everyone in their bedroom be like, nah, fuck Pro Tools, I'm going to use this and that. And the concept of taking stems out, if you get sent a session in Pro Tools, taking the stems out and putting them into your preferred DAW, if that makes you work quicker, then I guess there's nothing wrong with that. But just the structure I've seen being in studios with people in London is everyone's working in the same thing in Pro Tools. It doesn't make sense to be like, oh yeah, we've got this revision. Can you go back to this version or this playlist? Everyone can share things in Pro Tools and Audio Movers. A lot of that's done on Pro Tools over the internet. So yeah, anyway, there'll be people who argue in the comments. So go on.
And as well, sorry, I'll just say this last bit. Again, something that is very important is that the reason that many people work on Pro Tools is because there's this integration. So what you'll find a lot of times is that you can get the full session. So a producer will do all of, they'll get it to a certain point, chuck it to the mixer, and they've got Serbian talks about it all the time. You'll have all the plugins, and that's why you'll hear mixers saying, fucking hell, this new plugin's out, right, go and get a license and go and buy that new plugin. You know what I mean? So obviously, if you think about the ease of use for like a whole chain for a song, from the recording to the production, it could all be one session. All the plugins are loaded, and the mixer could be like, all right, I see what you're doing there on the vocals. Actually, like what Serbian says all the time, right, see these 5 plugins, can I do that on one plugin? Does that need to be there? You know what I mean? Then you've got, it's just integratability. So yeah, fuck Pro Tools. Absolutely fuck it hard in the arse. Right,
I like it now, man. It can do everything. You've just got to learn how to do it.
It's just slow, man. It's just there's loads of stuff it can't do, and that's what annoys us. Okay, so getting away from that because I'm starting to feel annoyed. I've had a positivity towards Pro Tools. Right, okay. Number 4, in the box mixing is inferior to analog mixing.
100%. Okay, I'm kidding.
Right. This is bullshit, right? Because at the end of the day, again, if we think about industry standards, at the end of the day, Serbian completely in the box. Joshua completely in the box. Celik completely in the box. Most guys are completely in the box these days. And we're not talking about because this is what annoys me, right? You get the analog Luddites and I could hear them chiming. I could hear them like
I can hear
whispering
Paul
in my
Ashmore
ear.
typing away right now.
Like, yeah, but this is it. They tracked on hardware. They already sounded good because they had hardware. They don't need it because it's already got hardware. Ooh. Look, yeah, like tracking.
That is a
very,
point, though.
Yeah, like tracking is very handy. For example, like when I was working with a client last week in the studio, we were doing a demo together, and I put the diode bridge in the Fairchild chain in, and yeah, man, fucking that got that fucking level vocal, I got that vocal leveled, and I was sitting back thinking, wow, this vocal doesn't really need much done to it, and having it like printed on the way in, the way I wanted it was good, man. But yeah, when it comes to in the box, like at the end of the day, yeah, regardless if it's done analog or digital, all the tools are there for you, man. Like, you really, really can work quicker in the box. Okay, it might not be as fun, but, the fact that you've got all these tools now with, the UFA and the Fader Port 16, like what I'm touching right now, you've got, like, every plugin to do every job, and they're getting quicker, and they're getting faster, and they're getting more elaborate. And you could go further than analog. You can go cleaner than analog. You don't have the limitations of analog. And at the end of the day, this is like the whole crux of the argument. If Serban Ganea, arguably the most decorated mixer of all time, more Grammys than Bob Clearmountain, I think he's fucking just up there, like I think Spike's not even close. Then if Serban could mix in the box, then yeah, of course you could mix professionally in the box. I've been mixing professionally I wouldn't say professionally, sorry. I'm trying to. I've been mixing in the box for years and years and years. I've tried to add analog in, and a lot of the times it just fucking slows me down, and the recall's a pain in the arse, and yeah, quality wise I just don't really see any difference. Like, I remember Emre sent me this mix where it was like a mix off. It was like one of the biggest mixers in Turkey at the time, and he was like, right, they thought they were going to get the mix, so they gave it to Emre and says, we're not happy with this, we're not happy. Emre did it completely in the box, and he let me hear. I'm one of the only people that'll ever get to hear this two mixes side by side. And what you could hear was, you could hear the coloration of the analog, where what Emre had with having that just clean digital processing was he can choose where to add his depth. He could choose where to add the saturation and distortion. And it was clear and open and super, super punchy. Like, what you would class that analog mixes would be warmth. That fucking horrible term, warmth. It was warmth. It was coloured. It was like a little bit woofy in the low end. It wasn't as punchy, as clear. Didn't have as much separation. It was still a good mix. It was just that, Emre just fucking nailed it. He just nailed that genre. And I find that a lot of times these days, a lot of mixers can just nail it in the box. Again, if you think about, Jason Joshua, for God's sake, you know what I mean? Like, that man has all the analog that he could want. But again, he mixes in the box, and he chooses to mix in the box, and they all do. Of course, obviously, you've got the whole caveat of, if you're choosing to do like 2-3 mixes a day, unless you've got what Ed's, got in the studio now, what Paul Ashmore's got, with the whole full analog recallability stuff. Yeah, then maybe you would argue things will maybe change. But at the end of the day, listen to, a Serban mix and tell me that's a shit mix. The fucking hell, man. The guy's a fucking king, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, it's having the best of both. I love analog. I love having something tactile. I do like the sounds you can get out of it. I quite like the limitations, but I can do both now.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I'd done a mix. My Roses mix was all in the box. The one you heard on the podcast wasn't that great. I've redone it. It'll be on my website soon, because I think I've got the translation right. But having the best of both and the digital recallability of the Wes audio gear, the phrase game changing gets thrown around a lot, and there's very few things that actually do game change, but the whole concept of recallable analog has changed the game quite a bit. And now that I've got all the routing set up, my template set up with all of it going, which I'm not going to change because I'm not going to buy any gear this year as promised, I'm good to go. And I've already repurposed that template for a mix I'm doing at the moment, and it's easy. The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. For a little bit more, $39.99 a month, you can have 2 artists on your roster, which includes everything just mentioned. Additionally, synced lyrics in Apple Music, further streaming analytics statistics. You can create a customizable record name. Mine, for example, is Ed Thorne Rhythm and Records. And you can customize release dates, pre-order dates, iTunes pricing, and again, much more. Now, if you're an artist manager or a record label, the Ultimate Bundle gives you up to 100 artists for just $89.99 a year. And you get 1 terabyte of instant file sharing, which is useful, but also contact information for thousands of playlist curators on Spotify. This is really useful so you can pitch your artist music to playlist curators around the world. Only available in the Ultimate Bundle from DistroKid. So my number 4, podcast number 8. You can't mix and master professionally on cheap speakers. Now, I guess we could split this up into 2 sections, mixing and mastering. Yes, you can get a mix and a master to a good place with cheap speakers. And by cheap, let's say anything below £1,000. But there are limitations that are going to cause problems in the mixing phase, in my opinion. I wouldn't necessarily want to be claiming to master professionally on like KRKs. You can do it, obviously, with all of these things. This is more of a kind of, not necessarily one I agree or disagree with, but it is a bit of bullshit out there. This is one where you can definitely go both ways. I think it's more enjoyable on nicer speakers. I think in terms of the fidelity you need for accurate transient reproduction, it definitely applies to mastering. And mixing is, which side of the fence do you sit on? Because Spike Stent mixes on KH120s, and I sold them because I just couldn't get on with compression on them, harmonic distortion on them. I would overcompensate massively because of them. But then the point of those speakers and the Neumann headphones is if you can get a mix to punch with energy on those, then you really do have a banging mix. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, when it comes to audio, what the good thing about audio is that there is always an exception to the rule. Always an exception. Like, for example, like Tour Medina, like he was working on the KRK V series, not the Rockets, but the V series. I don't know how much. They're still under $1,000 though, were they? I think when they came out, were they under $1,000? I would imagine so.
I don't know, maybe not. A grand 20 years ago is the equivalent of about 5 now, isn't it? So.
Yeah, true, I know. But yeah, I think, maybe and again, people have commented this to me, and actually this will be a good segue to kind of go into like a comment that I had. It was a good discussion, because I do like a good discussion. You all know me in the comments, can't help myself. Ed just sits there going, quality. Paul's got the comment section this week. I'll just sit back. So it was basically a comment that somebody had said, right, I get what you're saying about limitations and stuff, but if we look at what people were mixing on 20, 15, 10 years ago, as I said, KRK V series and, the NS10s, and again, what was good back then isn't necessarily maybe as good as it was now. KRK, the original, what Spike was mixing on, not the V series, like the original KRKs, that's what he was mixing on. I think he still does reference on quite a lot, mixed on those KRKs for decades. So there are, exceptions to the rule, and they were saying, well, if they could mix on kind of subpar stuff, but what's thought of as subpar now, then, what's the difference nowadays? And, my reply to that was what Jason Joshua told Dave Pensado about 10 years ago, when he was mixing on NS10s, was, Dave, I'm not going to do his accent, Dave, to mix modern records, you've got to use modern tools. And, if we look at all the mixers now that have changed, tune. So if we think about, the NS10 guys, so Bob Claremountain doesn't mix on NS10s anymore. If you go on his website, it actually tells you they sit in a cupboard. I think he's moved to Dyne Audio now, and another form of Yamahas, like the older Yamahas that are meant to be more linear, I think. If we look at Dave Pensado is now on Amphions.
Dutch and Dutch, 8Cs.
Has he moved from the Amphions? Because I know he was on Amphions, maybe that was maybe 6 years ago. Has he moved again?
Yeah, you said that at the mix with the Masters thing we went to with Jason when he came on the call.
Right, okay, so there you go, right? So he's went for, and he was on speakers before that as well. Like, he changed tune again. He was on KRKs and he was on NS10s. And then so he had, I can't remember what they were expensive, maybe Augsburgers. I think he had Augsburgers and then he moved to the Amphions, and then if he's moved to Dutch and Dutch, and then if we think of Jason Joshua, he's now on ATC. You know what I mean? So like a lot of these mixers, you know, were mixing on NS10s and KRKs when the device playback systems of that time were just basically all mid-range. You didn't have to worry about your low end. You didn't have to fucking worry about your top end. That's why all you hear is, nail the mid-range. All you got to do is nail the mid-range. You got yourself a stand-up mix. But the issue is today we've got full range monitoring and it's getting more accessible and it's getting better all the time. If we think about, you know, the Apple AirPods, compare Apple AirPods to what was available 10 years ago. Jesus Christ. I mean, like, they're not as good as fucking Hifimans and stuff, but the Apple AirPods are pretty, you know, decent sounding. And they're everywhere. Like, if you go into, like, the college, like, I work in the college, and if you look at, like, what's on people's ears, Jesus, it's all Apple AirPods, man. They're like the most, I think they're arguably one of the best-selling earbuds of all time, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I wear mine about London on transport just for the noise cancellation element.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about, you know, all of these changes in, you know, the playback systems, we're getting more linear results, less distortion, and wider frequency ranges. Headphones are so popular. And you think about headphones, you're getting, you know, like, we're not in the days of the Sony MDR 7506s anymore, where it was like no sub and fucking no top end, just mid-range. We've got, you know, headphones, even cheap headphones, Bear Dynamics, and fucking, you know, even cheaper than that, even like, you know, wireless fucking Sony stuff, you know, that goes all the way down to 20 hertz, all the way up to 20 kilohertz, and you've got the entire frequency spectrum. So, you know, mixing your low end is really, really important. That's why people nowadays are like, yeah, the whole nail the mid-range thing. It's nailing the mid-range is still absolutely vital because it's the most prominent range that humans are perceptive to. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, in the modern world, in the modern genres, imagine you're mixing a Kendrick Lamar record and you can't mix your low end right. Imagine turning to Kendrick and going, yeah, but man, listen on a pair of like MP3, listen, get an MP3 player and listen to that from 10 years ago, and yeah, you don't need to worry about it. It's bullshit.
We've gone a little bit off subject because the point was you can't mix and master professionally on cheap speakers, not you can't mix without low end and top end.
You can, but I just think that there needs to be context in there. There's always an exception to the rule, and I think, you know, the hard thing about this, Ed, is that what do we define as budget? That's really, really hard. Like, budget, you know, for somebody might be, you know, fucking £600. For some mixers, $1,000, $2,000 might be budget. It's crazy when you get higher up. Look, at the end of the day, do I think that I could mix professionally on these I've got in front of me? I've moved them back in here. The iLoud Micros. I could mix on them, but I'd struggle. I would struggle, man. Like, would
you be confident?
No.
Yeah.
Calais, nope. I've said it. I'm being honest, man. I think like
now there'll be those people raging.
Struggle.
There'll be those people raging in the comments saying, "I can mix on HS8s and all that." And I almost guarantee there'll be a lot of people saying that who won't have mixed on anything more expensive. And it's like you were saying there, that the Precisions, they're the best speakers I've heard. They are, because that's the best speaker you've heard in
my
your
studio. Yeah.
Put some Amphions next to them and they just blow them out of the park. I guarantee it because I've heard them.
Yeah.
So, this was a long, waffly point, I feel like.
It's a good point, though, because I think that what we'll end it with, we'll just say that it can be done because there's always exceptions to the rule. There are people out there that will have, say, a pair of Calais. And there are people, I know mastering engineers that have said to me, like, I know mixers that are on HS, whatever, and they do good mixes. It's just that on average is like 8 times out of 10 and only get bad translation from mixers. But there are exceptions to the rule, Paul. And I think that's what we're finding with this is that there is an exception to everything. And you could have 1 million mixers, right? 1 million mixers that say, I just cannot get a good mix out of this, like anything, speakers under $1,000. All you need is one guy that could do it consistently, and he breaks the rule. He breaks everything. All it takes is one.
And more than that, you can have 10 grand speakers in a shit room and they sound
totally.
crap. You can have, your Callies in a great sounding room, and they will sound good. But it's more it's more getting into speaker design and the physics of it, where the low end stuff, low price stuff is so limited. You're getting into harmonic distortion, fuzzy top end. You're not getting the transient depth, detail. Things like resolve, and
Here's the best way to end that, Ed. Right? There's the best way. The right way to say it is that you can mix professionally on budget speakers in an amazing room, but you need an amazing room. I think that's what hopefully we could all agree on. If we're now going to sit there and say you could compete professionally with a fucking terrible room with budget speakers, I think we're being unrealistic.
That's been disingenuous. Yeah,
the room is the most important. You get the room right first, and then I'd say you'd be able to probably give budget speakers a really, really fucking good try, and learn them, work at them. Yeah, it might maybe take you longer to get where you need to get to. You'll get there in the end, but yeah, I think what we've learned recently is that you can do it on budget speakers. It's just what we found is it takes you longer, and you'll probably have more revisions. You'll probably have more feedback notes. You will get there in the end. It's just that more expensive monitoring really kind of does allow you to hear more, and it allows you to kind of get it right closer. Allows you to get things into a point where you have less feedback notes, but you can do it. Yeah, I'll just take you a little bit more hard work, maybe a little bit more work. Yeah,
that's a good way to end that. Right, what's your fifth and final point?
God, I can really waffle when I get into things.
Fuck it, right.
I know, sorry. I apologise to everybody. Actually, I don't fucking get it up. You're here to watch it. Enjoy it. Number 5. Ooh. He'll still disagree with me here. Okay, number 5. And I've proved it. I have proved it. ADC, analog to digital conversion, makes a big difference. If you don't have good analog to digital conversion, your mixes will be shit. Bullshit. Like, having good analog to digital conversion isn't going to fucking make or break your mix. It just isn't at all. Look at him, the wee tongue's going.
I won't disagree with that.
Good. It's about fucking time, because the amount of arguments we've had in the past about fucking ADC.
No, we've not. I've not argued with you. I've questioned your process for it.
Yeah, he's like that, ladies and gentlemen. He does that all the time. He's like that.
There's a difference between saying, I think you're wrong, and saying, okay, how did you do that? Why did you do that? To what point did you do that? Right, okay. That's not arguing. That's just me asking you to find out.
Well, kind of arguing now, were you?
I'm arguing that I'm not arguing.
Yeah, baby.
Pedantic. See you next Tuesday.
Yeah, so what was it again? Yeah,
no, but I've never said to you, oh, you've got a good ADC. It's more been like, what are the benefits of better converters? Particularly in my case in mind, with I get industry people saying, yeah, your X16 is not good enough. You get that low end, low mid.
Yeah, in the dark. Like, that's the thing that everybody gets wrong. That's what, I nailed so many people in the 2 ADC videos that I did. Remember, right? I didn't say conversion. I said analog to digital conversion. Digital to analog conversion, really, really important. Digital to analog conversion is the thing when you record something, or you put your analog gear through it and you go, holy shit, the ADC is amazing. Yeah, my analog gear sounds so much better. Yeah, it's because of the digital to analog conversion. It's making your speakers and your headphones sound better, but it's got absolutely fucking hee-haw to do with your analog gear. That's why I proved on my channel twice. The second video is way, way better. I was more naive the first time I did the first one. I got the right results, but it could have been better. The second one I nailed, and I stuck up the Evo 16 ADC versus the Lynx Aurora ADC, and there was the Lynx Aurora at the same sample rate was slightly better, but we're talking, it's not like both of them couldn't even add a 0.1 dB of a difference. Not even 0.1 dB of a difference. It's so minute. It'll add up. What, 0.1 dB of a difference? You actually, come on. I know people that can't even hear fucking 3 dB of a difference. That's 3 dB louder. Is it? Yeah, it is, yeah. There's many people out there, they normally say that trained critical professionals, 1 dB is where people say they start to hear a difference, like a 1 dB level difference. But when it comes to tonal difference, when we're talking about differences that are, a tonal shift, or again, it's a difference that comes from saturation or harmonics or anything like that, you're in a minefield. But when you're talking not even 0.1 dB of a difference, you're just arguing for the sake of arguing. And it's not going to make your mix any better. It's not going to make your analog gear sound any better. But when it comes to those things, it's about what you do with it, not about, the tiny marginal difference that is there that's fucking completely inaudible.
To back up that I've not argued specifically that you can't, the quality of ADC is a problem, is that I know for a fact, as long as you've got, 120 decibels seems like a good number. Seems to be what a lot of companies are settling on device-wise. And that's because at that point, the amount of variables beyond that are going to cause more of a problem, like the room, the skill of the engineer, the harmonic saturation content in a piece of analog, or, the mid-side processing, or the crossfeed or lack of crossfeed in headphones. All that's going to cause way bigger problems in your mix translation than a fucking converter.
Yep. But however, though, the reason why I think we did have an argument, I know we joke quite a lot, was I think we had a slight disagreement because I was trying to tell you not to buy the links. You were so sure you were going to buy the links for a long time. You were really considering
Again,
it.
I don't class that as a disagreement. I class that as I was verbalizing my thoughts and you were saying, nah, shit idea. And you had a good point.
I know.
It's on the bucket list still. And it might be something I go for next year, partly because I want the extra I/O. But yeah, it's the biggest problem in my mixes now is nothing in this studio. It is me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%.
That's intentional. All right, my fifth and number 10. I do have a bonus, by the way.
Oh,
this is
Brucey bonus.
Proving quite a good episode as we are bickering. This will instigate more bickering. Not this one, though. This one is a genuine point. Well, it's a point I contest, but I get told you shouldn't mix or master your own music. Now, I disagree because I feel that with the mastering, I kind of agree. With the mixing, I disagree because the way I do it is the mixing then becomes a little bit of the production phase in that I'm deciding what goes in and out, where things are tailed off, how I can use effects and processing to influence a section. I always end up thinking, okay, the song needs something here. So I mix with a songwriter, a producer, and a mix engineer's hat on. And that for me is part of the final result. And it's a big part of the final result. I've also tried, now I've had 3 other people mix different songs of mine. And although they've been good in their respective rights, they've not been able to tune into what's going on in my head in a way that I've been happy with. So I think that's bullshit. You can mix your own music in terms of mastering. This then feeds on to a second part, which is if you've mixed a track, you shouldn't master it. I'm on the fence with that. I think you can do both. I think economically you should offer both because clients, most of the time, don't know the difference between both. So you have to say that you can mix and master. In an ideal world, yes, if you've taken files from a producer, you've done the mix, give it off to someone else with a third-party set of ears and probably more expensive monitoring that costs more than £1,000.
Yep. So this is quite multifaceted. So I'd say it depends on where you are in the industry. If you're in the industry, right, if you're in the music industry, then there's a chain, right? Even Serban, Spike, all the big mixers, Jason, they all go to mastering engineers. That's the chain. That's the way it's been done. And no matter how you do it, no matter what you say, you need to make friends with a mastering engineer and you need to be in that chain. You need to play ball. You need to network.
And
right?
there's two things to bear in mind with that, what you've just said is at that level of the industry, there is still this model where everyone is an expert at one job. Correct. And those people, although I'm sure they could do far better mastering jobs than I can, they are where they are because they have specialized in one thing. They are an absolute expert at one thing. So put 4 experts together, the songwriter, the producer, the mix engineer, and the mastering engineer, and obviously the performers. You've got the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop, the best of the bunch in the industry.
Now, I think what's also important to mention is that these top mixers, even though they all kind of do have to go to a mastering engineer, they are still mixing and mastering because their main aim is to have a transfer. Their main aim is to give it to the mastering engineer, and the mastering engineer goes, yeah, I just made it half a dB louder. and like added 0.1 dB shelf. That's really like the level that they want to be at. It's a safety net. The mastering engineer on the top level is genuinely just a safety net. They are not there to be doing any heavy lifting. Their job is, if it needs heavy lifting, their job is to send it back and go, I would probably fucking remix that.
Yeah,
And that sometimes
fix the recording in the mix and fix the mix in the master isn't an applicable thing at that level.
However, I suppose then you get into the whole realms of, well, if it's been accepted by the client, then the mastering engineer gets told to fuck off. But yeah, like I think if you're looking at this from a non-industry environment and you want to, see this as a business, then you should be kind of offering mixing and mastering, in my opinion. Tura Medina, when I've had chats with him, he's always said to me, and it was a good analogy, I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, and he was like, Paul, he's like, think about, he went, when a client is choosing you, right? And you think about when you go to a restaurant and you go to some place to eat. Now you imagine that, you're taking your wife out for dinner and the place that you go to are like, yeah, we don't do starters, we only do mains, we don't do desserts. And they're like, right, okay, so you don't get a dessert here. Yeah, you're going to have to go someplace else to get a dessert. Are you going to go to that place, even though their main is fucking superb, like mwah, Michelin star? If your missus, like my missus, always has like I don't know how women do this, by the way, they always seem to have a stomach for fucking dessert. Like I'll be full, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so full. And I'm like, you didn't even eat half of that. Yeah, I know, but yeah, dessert stomach. You're like, if you're out with your missus, right, or your partner, right, them or they, and they're a dessert fiend, then what's going to happen is they're going to be like, I don't want to go there because I need to get dessert. And that's the way and it made sense, that analogy, when he said it to me. He's like, you've got to be an all-encompassing place when you're not in that kind of world. Now, Tura is in the Latin side of the industry. But, he's at a point where he's that, top level where he's just like, no, I mix and I master it. Emre, I mix and I master. But I suppose if you were to take them two and the Sabrina Carpenters and that kind of, more US side of it, Billboard like top 10, US pop side of it, they would need to, send it off to a mastering engineer. But if you're out that kind of, for 99.8% of us use watching this, you're going to be in that boat where you're probably going to need to offer mastering. And at the end of the day, if you're mixing into the limiter correctly, and you're using the limiter and pushing compression, doing whatever you're doing on the two bus to get that mix as loud as it can be without ruining the song, and you can get it loud without ruining the song, then that's essentially a master. All you're doing is you've not got that safety net. That's all it is. But at the end of the day, if you've got the loudness and the client is like, I'm happy with that, and especially if you're like me, who's probably not, and me and Ed, who's probably not going to have to deal with labels, you're just giving it to a client, and you're like, there it is there. Is it loud enough? Loud enough for me. Do you like it? Sounds great. Sounds amazing. Stick it out, mix and master, job done. And I suppose, for a lot of mixers, the mastering you're doing anyway. Like, a lot of times, I kind of am mastering because I've got master plan, and my mastering is, the clipping, is the low end control and watching and listening to the mix, how it interacts with that limiter and, as I push it for the loudness. I'm really reserved. Marcel tells me all the time. He's like, yeah, it's good. You give me quite a bit of headroom. When I say give a bit of headroom, I normally might, send the mix off at -9, -10, and then he maybe tries to see, can I maybe get this to maybe -8, -7. He'll then try and get it even louder. But I know I could easily just go to that dial, and
the loud knob in master plan.
Yeah, and just see how it goes. But I'm reserved, and I give it to, and I just always let Marcel do his thing because I personally like the safety net. However, from a business point of view, if a client comes to me and says, look, either you mix and master it or you didn't get the gig, then I'm like, fucking give it here. I will get you the loudness and I'll get it what it needs to be and I'll send it off and we won't finish until you're happy. So again, I think a lot of things that we've spoke about, it depends where you are. Depends where you sit in the audio world. There are certain rules for certain parts of the world. For, as I said, 99.8% of us, we're going to be in the camp where you are probably going to need to do mixing and mastering. So, yeah, there you have it. 10 myths, Ed. We got through it, Ed. We got
10 myths.
No, Brucey bonus though. Where's my Brucey bonus?
I've got a bonus for you.
Right, okay.
Pre-mixing is not essential.
Nah, if you're right, it's not essential. I mean,
Damn, I thought you were going to walk out on that.
Nah, because at the end of the day, it's like...
Been winding you up all episode for that big finisher.
No, because see, at the end of the day, right, I'd argue that, like, pre-mixing is something that we all do. See, when you're chopping up and you're tidying everything and you're, like, aligning the drums, it depends what you class as mixing. I class as mixing as what the Manes and stuff and the Spikes will do, where all the assistants have done all the edit and the Jason Joshua's, all the effects are done, and they just come up and use their experience in the rear. That's mixing. So I suppose, when you say pre-mixing it isn't essential, it is essential. It's just that it depends on how you class pre-mixing. You just might class pre-mixing as mixing. I think it's a definition thing. So I think you are going to have to edit. So if we're saying that you don't need to like manually align your drums and you don't need to like cut things and cut breaths and cut out pops and squeaks, and that's why classes all the premix and stuff. If we don't need to do that, you don't need to do it, but I'd say you probably should do it.
I do see the benefits of RXing your vocals and your acoustics in a separate session.
If it's bad recording, yeah.
Yeah, auto aligning all your drums.
Yeah.
Doing all that. But there's some things like compression, EQ, it's so, resonances, they're so dependent on the rest of the elements in the mix. I agree. There's some things you could do. Like I'm thinking I could probably save all the instances of M auto align. I mean, the thing with RX is you have to print anyway. You have to commit because the latency is just fucking days behind. It's
it's terrible.
So I guess that's pre-mixing. Yeah. There could be things you could do like that to speed up the mixing process, or to at least not slow down the mixing process. Once you're in the creative phase.
So I would say that's a 50-50. I'd say like it's not a myth. It's not really bullshit. It's just subjective.
All right, mission not accomplished. I did not wind Paul Third up with that one.
Can't believe you ended the podcast on that. Honestly, I feel like just editing it out in spite. Fucking hell. How dare you do that to our audience?
I do the editing. So, on that bombshell, I'm going to Costa Rica this week. So have a lovely time. I hope it's cold. And I may not come back. It's been emotional if I don't.
Come back. No what? Next time you see me, you know what? Actually, I need to say that. So next week, he's not going to be here because he's getting a tan.
I don't get tan. I go the colour of these headphones and then it peels.
So I'm going to have a special guest because I'm not doing it on my own because it's going to be boring. So I have got... No, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to leave it a surprise. So I've got a guest next week and I'll leave it as a surprise. And yeah, it'll be quite interesting. It's going to be a geeky one. But there's going to be a lot of analogue involved in this one. It's going to be very geeky. Very geeky. Yeah, thought I'd just do that to Ed for this fuck. But he would much rather be in Costa Rica. Fuck, so would I. And so would my wife. So yes.
It's close.
Bullshit. You know what? We're done. Right? Fucking know what? We're done. Fucking bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.